President Cyril Ramaphosa has appointed the Democratic Alliance's former finance spokesperson, Dion George, as the new forestry, fisheries and the environment minister. He replaces Barbara Creecy, with Narend Singh and Bernice Swartz as his deputies. George joins us now to outline his plans for the department. A very good evening to you, Mr. George. Thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Now, from
good evening.
Yes, from the few and short interviews that you've done over the past couple of days, you list climate change and the country's just energy transition towards a low-carbon economy to a green economy as your biggest priorities.
Yes, that's right. I mean, obviously, climate change is the most important phenomenon that faces the world now and on an ongoing basis. So we do need to move in the right direction. So obviously, South Africa has got obligations, international obligations. And as part of the just energy transition, we are receiving climate financing for projects so that we can have greener projects and start building green energy into our economy. So money is starting to come in. The crucial thing, though, is that we are not moving fast enough in terms of the projects to start generating that kind of green energy. So that's where we are lagging. Obviously, there's a lot of reasons why, etc. So what I'm certainly planning to do is to assist in accelerating that process during my term of office in this department. So that is the most important factor. Now, obviously, South Africa has its complexities. We've got our troubled history, etc. So we do have to bear in mind that we're a developing economy and that we are not Northern Europe and we are not there. So one thing that I'm going to be very clear on also is that we are moving and we're going to move as fast as we can at a pace that we can move at. And we do need to go faster. But we aren't going to be pushed around and we aren't going to be bullied and we are not going to be punished because that is not going to work. So that I'm very clear on, and I wanted that to be quite clear from the very outset. So that's the big important matter that we need to focus on. We have got the President's Climate Commission. They are a really great expert group of people. I've already had a brief conversation with Vali Musa, who is very important in that commission, etc. So we are progressing very, very nicely. So yes, that is the big headline issue that's going to take up a lot of our time and energy and also into the future for the future generations. So that's the first big set piece. But there's also other very important.
Can I stop you right there for
Sure.
a second, Minister, if you don't mind? And we are going to get to the issues around the just energy transition in a while. But I want us to stay with the climate issues for a second, because I mean our commitment towards reducing emissions and respecting the international protocols that we signatory to is unquestionable. We've made that commitment, and everyone, I think, accepts and understands that. But I want to take you back to what you said from the start about how we're not moving fast enough with regard to projects, and you said there were numerous reasons why. Take us into, why? What are those reasons as far as you understand? What are those reasons why we are not moving fast enough with the projects that we have financed to actually move them?
I will be engaging with my counterparts in the cabinet responsible for electricity and energy because this is a large problem, I believe, that we are not making sufficient progress. Now, the reason for that is because we have regulation that isn't in the right place. And I think also we have not had sufficient political will to move in the right direction or faster in the right direction. We know that our energy sector is heavily reliant on coal. I mean, we know there's the reasons for that, but we aren't moving swiftly enough. And I think that there's been a lack of effort also. But I am feeling quite confident because we do have a new ministry now of energy and electricity. So that will be a department, will be set up, etc. And so they will be able to make progress. So we must remember we have a new government. We have a government of national unity. It comprises of different personalities. And I think that's going to make it much more robust and enrich the environment. So I'm certainly going to be pushing on that because we have, as you said, we have made commitments, and of course we want to comply with them. I mean, we want to be a responsible international partner in fighting this very difficult problem of climate change and adapting to it. So there is that absolute commitment. But having said that, I think it's important that it needs to be understood the complexities that we have. I mean, yes, of course, you want to comply with all of the agreements we've complied with, but just signing a piece of paper doesn't make it happen, doesn't make it so. So what we need to do is we need to get it done. That's the crucial thing. So money is coming in to the just energy transition. We are attracting a lot of money, but the money is not getting spent because the projects are not there. And we need to accelerate that. And that's a regulatory problem. So that is one of my top priorities, to get that moving, because it is possible. We have the technology, we've got innovation. We need to get a move on that. So that is what I'm going to be pushing in the very first instance.
So it's just to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. So you're saying it's a regulatory problem and not a policy problem. And I'm asking this because only last month when Stats SA confirmed that, we're seeing a decline in the first quarter of the economy. You blamed that on bad policy. So are you saying that in this instance, it's regulatory issues and not necessarily the policy behind?
I do think that we have policy complexities that need to be looked at because our regulations are too slow and they get in the way of progress. But also in terms of policy, what we need to do is we need to make sure that we can move away. For example, we have already had discussions regarding Eskom, because Eskom needs to be unbundled. We know that, but it is moving incredibly slowly. And that is a policy issue. So the articulation is there, but getting it done is the problem. So I will certainly be pushing also on that, because what we need to do is we need to say, policy is that we are going to transition away from our coal-powered stations. We are going to introduce green energy. We're going to focus on other technologies, etc. There are many out there, but we need to get a move on it, or else we are not going to be able to comply with what we have promised to do. And that's something that is not acceptable.
Minister, I'm going to ask you to stay right where you are. We're going to continue with this conversation, but right after this short break. Welcome back. We are, of course, in conversation with Mr. Dion George, who is the new Forestry, Fisheries and Environment Minister. Minister, before we went to break, you're talking about transitioning, and in the last hour, I was having a conversation with the minister responsible for electricity. And one of the points I was making to him was that, everyone says, or projections are that for the next decade, we're still going to rely heavily on a coal-fired electricity generation. And we don't have to be shy about that reality. We should actually make that point clear to all and sundry, that as much as we are keen and doing everything we need to do to transition, but also to comply with the protocols and treaties that we are part of, that reality is there, and we have to actually make sure that in the interest of our nation, we make everyone understand, but also we make use of everything that we have available responsibly, of course.
Well, yes, absolutely. It goes without saying. The fact is, we're sitting on a pile of coal. That's what we have here. We've been using that. So it was inevitable that we are going to use that for energy. And that is just so. That is the reality. You cannot change it. And the fact of the matter is we don't have enough electricity, actually, in our grids. So what we need to do is we need to get the new energies going. That's what we needs to happen. So yes, absolutely, we are going to need to rely on the fossil fuels. We're going to have to do that. But at the same time, nothing actually stops us from accelerating those new greener technologies that the money is available for. And that's the point that I think everybody's making. I think we all agreed. The fact of the matter is it's not going to change overnight. And I mean, we also all agreed with the fact that South Africa does have its complexities. The fact is that we are the 14th biggest emitter, and we're the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases in Africa. That is a fact. But it came that way historically. And so it doesn't change overnight. And as I said before, we're not Northern Europe. We are not that. We are in Africa. We are emerging. We are developing, and we have got complexities. We've got a lot of problems in our economy. So yes, absolutely. If we get greener energy and we can do that, we can get the innovation, we can create jobs in those sectors, it is very much possible. But what is needed, as I said before, is that you need to have the right regulatory framework, policy framework, and then political will to actually get those projects done. Because that is the concern of the funders of that fund are saying, well, I'm giving money, but well, where is the project? Because obviously what we want to do is make sure that we can start reducing our emissions, because we know climate change is real. It's happening all over the place, obviously. And it's affecting our country very heavily also already, because we've got areas in the country that are very water scarce already, and they're getting drier. And so it's going to impact very heavily on us if we don't move in the right direction. But it's a global problem. And we do want to be the sensible partners, and we want to do our bit. So there's absolutely no doubt about the fact that we want to do it. Now we've just got to actually go and get it done. But as I said before, is that my message is very clear, is that we can move at a pace that we can move at. And yes, we can accelerate, and we must do that. But we will not be pushed around, because that is not going to be a conducive environment. That's the crucial thing.
Do you also agree or disagree with the view held by some people that in trying to be, to use your words, sensible, as a country, we commit to all these treaties and agreements, but we don't zealously, or we don't guard our own national interests as zealously as some of the powerful nations in the world? And I'm talking about your Americas and your Germanys, who, when it comes to what they have to do to take care of themselves, they hardly ever listen to anyone else.
Well, I mean, if you look at the way that the power dynamic works in the world, it is so that we are in a weaker position, and that there are times when our voices are drowned out, as an African country, as a southern country, etc. So that does happen. But obviously, we've agreed that we're going to do various things, and we participate because we want to. South Africa wants to be a sensible partner in combating climate change by making our economy greener, etc. Of course we want to do that. I mean, that is a no-brainer. But the fact is, can we get it done fast enough? And the question is, we can move as fast as we can move. So just because you make a rule doesn't mean it's going to happen. What needs to happen is there needs to be the will to do it. There needs to be the policy framework and the regulation. Now, there is the will to do that. We're agreed. We want to do this. And money is coming in. But getting it done is always the complexity that we have. So, and that's the crucial thing in terms of our voice, is that our voice needs to be very clear in that we do have complexities that other countries do not have. We do have that complexity that we have to climb over because we've got a population that is, we've got an underdeveloped economy, we've got massive amounts of poverty, etc. We've got an economy that is not growing. So we need to balance things. You know, so for example, if you're going to have to choose between economic growth and being greener, and it's not going to generate any jobs, for example, then you're going to go the other way. It's obvious. So we need to have that in the conducive environment. So we need to have energy projects that will be job generating, that will allow us to transition away. But it cannot happen overnight. That is not possible. So of course we're making progress. We'll move in the right direction, etc. But that message needs to be clear. We are not going to be bullied because it is not going to be a good idea. Not that I'm saying anybody is doing that, but our voice is not necessarily as strong as the other voices. And that's something that also needs to be clarified and be quite clear.
Well, speaking of the need to strike that balance, but also, poverty, the need to create, to develop the economy, voices, bullying, and all those things. There's a view held by some people that, for example, environmental impact studies are being used to block big projects that could have huge economic outcomes. Your view on that matter?
Well, I think what we've got to remember in South Africa is that we've got a very unique biodiverse environment. We have got the Big Five. We've got a very rich wildlife environment. We have amazing plant life biodiversity. We are very abundantly endowed with fish and an ocean economy that we can harness. So we've got all those natural assets that do need to be leveraged for economic growth that will generate sustainable jobs. But the question is, how do you actually do that? That is the most important question. So, for example, when you have to look at balancing things, and it always is a balancing act. So, for example, if you look at exploration, if there's going to be exploration off the coast, for example, well, there's an impact on the ocean ecology. There is an impact on the communities that might be reliant on fishing, for example. So what will that actually do to your environment? And so the balance needs to be found. But certainly my own perspective on this, and certainly is going to be that way, is I'm going to sway towards conservation, because I think that is what we have to do, because we've got abundant natural resources and natural assets that we do need to leverage in a sensible and sustainable way for the benefit of our people in this country, so that we can fight unemployment and poverty. So that is what we need to do. How you do that is the hard part. You need to create that ecosystem. So, for example, I'm going to be looking very closely, for example, at the fishing communities along the coast that, for example, have been driven away sometimes from the economy that's right around them. That's where the balance needs to be found. So I'm going to be focusing very heavily on that. But when you look at, for example, how you balance everything out, is that you've got to look, for example, is how do we protect our natural heritage? How do we protect our wildlife? Because it's vulnerable. If you look at what's happening to our rhino population, I mean, why do we not have an environment where a rhino can actually walk around in a place with its horn on its head and not actually end up being hacked by a poacher? We need to create that environment. So we need to work backwards from that and say, well, okay, this is happening. Why is this happening? Because there's some kind of economic value in doing that. So how do you change that? That is what we need to do. So when you have a look at how you manage this whole very, very complicated matter, because on the one hand, you've got a very strong conservation and environmental lobby, which is absolutely vital, because if you don't have that, you have absolute exploitation. For example, you have the canned lion problem, for example. So you've got to actually look at what we have. We're naturally endowed. It's a very special heritage that we have. and that, of course, we need to harness it, and of course, we need to build our economy on it and generate the jobs that we need. So use those assets to the benefit of the people, but at the same time, we got to make sure that we don't end up destroying that heritage. That's the important thing. So that's the balance that needs to be found. And what my natural bent is going to be is that I'm going to sway towards conservation, because we've had an uptick in rhino poaching, for example. That is not acceptable. So I feel very strongly about the need for us to protect our very, very diverse natural assets. And that not only includes our wildlife, but also our plant life, for example, that's getting raided in the Northern Cape, for example. And of course, our fish stock. We've got to make sure that it's sustainable and that it benefits the communities that are around it, because those resources belong to everybody. So that is what is required.
I mean, I've had a lot of people actually saying the very same things that you're saying, that precisely because we are abundantly endowed, we should be swayed by conservation, and precisely because of the very issue that you're raising, where I mean, communities, fishing communities, for example, aren't benefiting. We should have these conversations better, because the people say, I mean, you have people talking past one another, or certain interests trumping, or someone running roughshod over the interests of other people. We're not getting the conversations right. We're not getting the balance right.
I think that is part of the problem that we do have, because if you look, for example, and of course, as you know, my background is in finance. I was in the finance committee for a very long time. So I believe that that is a great asset for the department that I'm the minister of, because I think in that way. So, for example, if you look at an economy, it's a system. So if we look at our system, for example, the economy, our natural asset economy, call it that, why are we not harnessing it that way? So why are people who are in close proximity, for example, to the game farms, for example, on the oceans, why is it that those communities are not benefiting enough? Something is wrong with that model. And so we need to fix that. So, for example, why is it that somebody in a community might feel some kind of incentive to go and hack the horn of a rhino? Why is there an incentive for that? Instead of it being, well, there should be an incentive for protecting that heritage, and then having somebody to come and take a photograph of it and not hurt it, for example. That is what we need to do. So we need to pivot our economy in that way, to say, well, we have these natural resources, and of course, we would want to harness them in some way, a sustainable way that's beneficial to the communities around them. But if you're going to exploit them to the point where there's going to be nothing left, well, then nobody's going to win. So you have to look at it as an environmental ecosystem, a very fragile one, of which we are part. And if we actually manage it effectively, we can do great things. I don't think that we're doing it as effectively as we could do it, but that is an ongoing process always. So, for example, if you look at the fishing licenses, that a lot of the small fisher communities have not been able to access licenses, for example. I don't know why that is the case, but anyway, that is something to be looked at. Because what you would want to have is that a community that is close to the ocean, and they've been living off the ocean for a long time, why is it that they're not actually being able to benefit from that? So something is wrong in that process. So that needs to be done. Also, if you look, for example, at communities that are in the game-rich areas, for example, why is it that they aren't going to, or why they are not necessarily benefiting from that? So it's perfectly fine to benefit from it, but you need to find that balance. And I don't think that we found it, because I don't believe, if you look at the statistics, for example, of what's happening to our rhino population, I mean, that is not acceptable. And the question is, why is that so? It's because there's something in that system that's incentivizing the wrong thing. So you've got to work backwards. You want a rhino to walk around in the field with its horn on it and not actually get attacked. That's what you want. So that's what you want to achieve. You've got to work backwards from that. How do you get to that? How do you disincentivize anything in the process that doesn't take you to that particular objective? So that's in terms of the big, massive conservation part of the department. I'm going to focus very heavily on that because it's very, very important. And because what I would like to be able to do is to say, right, we have these natural assets. They are very unusual in the world. They're very valuable, very, very valuable. How do we harness them sustainably so that we can uplift our population out of poverty and create the jobs that people need and make people proud also of being in a country that treats its wildlife in a good way? Because how you treat vulnerable people and vulnerable animals, etc., is a reflection of the society that you're in. And I don't think anybody can be proud when you have a look at a photograph and you see that the rhino's horn is cut off because somebody's going to come and steal it. I mean, that's not acceptable, and that needs to change.
Minister, thank you very much for your time. We wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.